I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here from the F1 podcast. Happy Monday, July 22nd, recording this a day after the Hungarian Grand Prix. I'm here with my amazing co-hosts, as usual, Erica and Andrew. How are you doing this beautiful Monday afternoon?
I'm
Doing
vibing.
well. I think I got more sleep than Max Verstappen did this weekend.
You lose.
I would be willing to bet that that is true.
To say that it was not controversial weekend, to say the least, would be an understatement. And it's too bad. There is so much to talk about this weekend.
We had Lando taking his third career pole position, Oscar right behind, and in a disturbing trend, Logan Sargent once again out-qualified Sergio Perez.
Do a barrel roll.
Or just
And-
also like another disturbing trend is that Perez crashing out again and costing Red Bull more valuable cash to this late race development in the year.
And it's not that they can't afford this at this point in time with the standing in the championship and with everything else that's happening. Like I'm still so shocked that this is all going down. We did see some great driving from a lot of the other drivers in qualifying, but for me, my eyes are glued to the midfield this year when it comes to qualifying. There is just so much insane stuff happening there by the time we get to Q2. But I'm kind of curious, Clary, how you're feeling, because we used to see, I feel like, a much stronger showing from Aston Martin in qualifying than what we've seen recently. I feel like a little bit of the spark and the magic has been missing the last little while.
They did qualify all right. I mean, P7 and P8 for Alonso and Stroll. It's just they lost out on strategy during the race, which evidently only allowed them to score 1 point this weekend when they could have probably maxed out like 7 or 8 points. And I know they're like well ahead in the championship in terms of like constructor results, but you kind of want them to see that conversion there. When you both qualify, you want both of them in the points. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Again, there was a little bit of controversy. I don't know if you saw. I think Alonso he didn't really like how the Parc Ferme, when Tsunoda crashed out of Q3 and how they restarted on the red flag. He wasn't very happy with the FIA stewards in that case, to the point where he threw his hat and he threw his sweater down before doing the to do his weight after the qualifying, and it was just a really bad look on Alonso's part, making his making his team pick up after him. It was just kind of a little childish in that way, but childish was kind of the theme of the weekend because we had a lot of childish shit going on radios, in the race strategies, a lot of fun going on in terms of child's play.
It seemed like, I know these guys are all technically supposed to be adults, but they acted like very much little kids this weekend. Also want to note from qualifying, George Russell having a dismal Q1. I don't know if it had to do with traffic per se, but qualifying P17 was not ideal for him and kind of really affected his race strategy for Sunday. It's disappointing because I think there was some great racing and some great moments like this weekend, but the controversy regarding a first maiden win for Oscar Piastri, I'm going to say this, it's shitty. Like, I feel bad for the guy, but strategy really played a factor and kind of ruined the weekend per se.
There was such a muted celebration for Oscar after everything that went down here in this race, between strategy calls, which I was just watching the recaps, and even the commentators pointed it out, how the strategy had been favoring Lando pretty much all weekend, and yet to make this call around team orders, which I think for just about anyone really didn't make a ton of sense, has everyone questioning not just why this happened, but what the downstream implications are of it. Because if you've got one guy who is putting pressure at the championship and he's in the position to take the win as well, I can understand you want the young guy to have a maiden win, but this is not the way to do it. Not the way to do it at all.
It was ugly. Like, I mean, it was ugly, but I mean it from a team perspective. I don't think Lando Norris did anything wrong. Because as Eric, as you mentioned, he was getting the beneficial strategy all week, and regardless of the position, right? Even when he went wide out of the gate in turn 1 to start and Oscar took over the lead, from there and that point onwards, traditionally, your lead driver should be the one that gets the preferred strategy. And when they came in to pit him to cover Hamilton there towards the end, it really made no sense to me. I'm like, why doesn't Oscar get that preferred strategy to begin with, to survive the undercut. And Lando, being the race driver and the crafty, how crafty he's become, he took advantage of being able to undercut his own teammate based on a really poor team strategy decision. I mean, really poor team strategy. And, then build a 5-second gap to kind of say, hey, you gave me this opportunity, I will take it. And then just to get emotionally just strung along on the radio by his team, it was so pathetic. I mean, every lap we had somebody like Will Joseph saying, Lando, we would like to do the switchback. And then it just got progressively getting worse, saying, Lando, turn 4 and 11, make sure and then he makes some excuses about how his tires were going to go off because he's going way too fast. And then basically comes out and says, you're going to need your teammate in order to win the championship, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, dude, if I was Lando, I'm like, guys, shut up. You put me in this position. Let me take advantage of it. And it was really like boring, or not boring. It was really pathetic to see like how petty it got on the radio with regards to the team orders.
I mean, we've talked about this a couple episodes ago, where this is new territory for McLaren. After this weekend, they've surpassed the amount of points they scored last year in the whole entire season, and they've done it basically in half the season, or like 13 something races. To quote one reporter, you're going to need your teammate going forward. And like this weekend, I generally do feel bad because it kind of made them look really like B-League status when they're doing these strategy calls.
The problem that then Lando now faces, because if he didn't, it's a lose-lose scenario. If he were to say, no, I am not going to let him pass, I'm going to win, he's going to get hated on by everybody online, right? The fans aren't going to appreciate what he did. But now that he gave up to be a team player, you're going to hear comments about like how, oh, Verstappen wouldn't do that. Schumacher wouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? It's just like he was put in a no-win situation by his team. It's not kind of the first time he's been in that position as well. Like Danny Ricciardo, Monza 2021, he was clearly faster, but they wanted Daniel to have that win to kind of kickstart back up his, career at McLaren. Didn't really pan out, right? So that's one win that Lando probably should have had earlier on in his career. And when you have a guy, as you mentioned, Erica, P2 in the championship, and these points are critical considering how bad Red Bull have been lately and how bad they're going to probably be soon because of the lack of opportunity they can develop to further the car. And the development that they brought this weekend did not pan out really well, in my opinion. These points are critical. And in an opportunity to have Lando win a championship, I think it's all gone now because of these decisions.
If this continues, like I've pointed it out before, there's been some rookie mistakes from Lando. I was happy to see him get a fairly solid start off the line, starting from P1, which has been missing. But there have been these strategy pieces that come into call too. We saw Ferrari in a similar position a couple of years ago, where you've got a great car, you've got talented drivers, but poor calls on strategy just cost you points. Lando is less than 80 points back of Max. Any point you can get at this point in time, because it's 7 fewer points being in P2 than being in P1. Well, then we're talking about, at that point in time, a 70-point gap. And 70 points, you're sitting there like, this is only a couple of wins, this is a couple of fastest laps, and we can get there, especially when you've got an entire back half of the season coming up. But I just really want to know what's going on. And Nico Rosberg even called out Andrea Stella after the race, being like, why are you doing this? And you keep putting them in this position. Cut it out, man. Like, get control, get your house in order. It needs to stop. There needs to be a clear, I would say, season strategy at this point, which I don't necessarily think they had in place coming into 2024. But as you said, we wouldn't expect Max to do this for Checo, because Max is the one that they want to take the WDC. If they want Lando to have a snowball's chance in hell of doing the same, they need to start making those calls as well. You're no longer in a place where you're a mid-grid team and it's kind of just like maximizing team points. It's maximizing team points, but with a preferential strategy if you're also going for WDC. So that's where I stand on it.
One, Zach Brown was not even in Hungary this weekend. He was here in Toronto for the Honda Indy, a 6-second lead, and you want Lando to slow down. If in the event he slows down for Oscar to catch up, or technically overpass him. What could potentially also happen? Another team could just come in and then they can ruin the whole strategy and idea of this. It's like
I loved how Lando did it the whole 6-second gap in like a one stretch area. You know what I mean? Like literally came down to a snail's pace to let him go through his in front of his team, which I thought was hilarious. But I do really feel bad for Oscar because again, he's been driving impeccably this year. He's been knocking on the door for his first win. And to kind of get the win semi-handed to him, it's a very important like spot in his position. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's amazing that he won and he deserves to win in Formula One. But unfortunately, when you couldn't close the gap up to Lando, it's really tough to see where people are going to say, "Oh, he deserved that win." In that case, and it's not one that you want to be considered your maiden win in Formula One because look how he got treated afterwards by his own teammate.
he didn't even get
Nobody was
sprayed.
spraying champagne. Like Lando just like went right to Lewis with the champagne. And I understand Lando's frustrations, but sometimes like for that case, you just got to put on this, you just got to put on the face for that and just somewhat celebrate it. But I completely understand where Lando's frustrations are. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't have blamed him this year if he broke the P1 trophy. I'm not gonna lie.
Would have been worth it to have to get it remade at this point in time. But I think I sent you two the message, but was laughing about how I'm sure some of Lando's PR team was holding him at gunpoint and he's liking the McLaren and the Oscar posts on Instagram because there's no way that he was sitting there like willingly doing that afterward with all of the emotions that we know and have seen were coursing through him afterward. I am very glad that we've got, Hammer Time's back. He's really giving us some exciting racing and is still showing time and time again. Good guy Lewis is still out there because he at least was cheerful and supporting Oscar when his own team and teammates didn't really seem to be doing it. But similar to how George Russell's first podium was a bit of a gimme, I think it was his first podium at Spa a few years ago when everything was under the safety car. It's that second time that I think we'll really get the full, I wouldn't say breadth of emotion from Oscar as he's a fairly stoic guy, but we'll get a little bit more excitement coming from him and the team and hopefully the type of celebration that we all hope he gets and deserves.
And it's too bad because I'm looking at some of the race classification, like the post-race kind of stats. You had Lewis Hamilton, 200th podium. I'm looking at this, Sergio Perez come from P16 to P7. You had George Russell come from P17 to P8 and get fastest lap. You had Yuki Tsunoda. You had both the Aston Martins. Actually, never mind. You had Lance Stroll in the points. And like, there are other moments to talk about this weekend that like clearly should be talked about, but all the focus is on a team that's got P1, P2, which normally should be celebrating this. And now they're P2 in the constructors and gaining some amazing momentum. Oh, well, also now that we have another driver that has won in a season that normally we haven't. I think this is the 7th driver that has won.
Correct. And he's also, fun fact, the 9th driver with car in his name to win a win a Grand Prix ever. That was the stat I saw thrown around on X this morning, and I thought that was fun. Carlos Sainz being the 8th ever. So it's there is still a lot to look forward to, but let's quickly talk about some of the other exciting moments from the race. We had a very chaotic start. There were lots of folks. We didn't have the weather to blame it on this time, but really aggressively going for, gaining some position heading into turn 1. Lots of folks kind of spinning off and shuffling around there. But Cleary, I know you spent a good chunk of time looking into this. What were the standout moments from you outside of what was going on in the top 3 positions?
Top 3 position. I thought some really great quality overtaking, in my opinion. I really thought it was a very high risk, high reward scenario for Max Verstappen lunging in through Hamilton to try to get into P3. When that ended up happening, it was, I can see why he did it, because there's a spot you're obviously going to do. He's been very frustrated with Lewis kind of previous to that with the great defending that Lewis was doing for his P3 position. And then when, he kind of went up the inside and Lewis turned in on him a little bit, 50-50 racing incident, he went flying. And I was shocked that the suspension even lasted on the car after that. And he was able to come home in P5. But perfect time scenario, perfect place for Charles Leclerc, just picking up the scraps, right? I have a feeling that teams are going to now pick up on this fact of if Max Verstappen is trying to make point or positions up, He's very aggressive in terms of his overtaking, and it leads to on-track crashes for the most part, right? A couple crashes the last couple races, which are then become easy points for you to pick up. So do you kind of just like play the weight game in that scenario to pick up extra positions? You could be picking up a multitude of positions in that case when that's happening. But yeah, I think great drive for Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, especially when there's a lot of controversy going around with Checo's seat. He really showcased. I know he crashed out early in qualification, or in the Q3 section, but he was able to, reward his mechanics with a points finish in Hungary. And there's a lot of conversation about what they're going to be doing post Spa, and I think Yuki has made a great case as to why, if they were to make a decision on Checo's seat to move him out, why he should be in there in that case.
Yeah, I mean, his contract has that clause about performance, and we kind of knew the clock was ticking. And I think time is nearly up for Checo at this point in time. I know the car is not where anyone wants it to be, but I just think even looking at the start of the season, before we started seeing the degradation in performance, the expectations were a lot higher, and he just simply wasn't meeting them for a good chunk of this. And it'll be interesting to see what goes on.
Just an overall theme of the weekend that I pitched. I think everybody is exhausted and needs the summer break to come up immediately, right? Like it was hot in Hungary this weekend. I think that combined with just a lot of feuds are boiling over. It was even in the commentary too. Like I know we'll touch up on this, but Max playing iRacing until like 4 a.m, right, with his team red line before a race day.
How is that even allowed? Like that,
I don't know, but Crofty couldn't get enough about talking about it. I think he mentioned it like 15, 20 times. And even Anthony Davison was saying, he was trying to allude from it, but it wasn't a great look from Sky this weekend, to be honest with you, with that commentary. Just get over it, Crofty. Like the guy's P1 in the championship, and he's been doing this his entire season. We can say the car development wasn't great this weekend. They didn't bring great upgrades, and that is a chink in the armor for Red Bull. And if Max is starting to now get really pissed off at his team, there should be a big level of concern in that camp.
Especially when we hear so many rumors about other teams kind of trying to romance him into joining their ranks, right? And if he's seeing positive momentum somewhere else, I think he just might be attracted to exploring those other options.
I think Toto had one of his Mercedes team members park in his spot this weekend just to force him to actually say, well, Max has to talk to me now.
I love that. I'd be 0% surprised if Toto did something like that. I feel like that's super on brand. I mean, Red Bull is struggling. I think one of the other teams that's in desperate need of a break and to think things through again would be Alpine. Not a great week performance-wise from them. Esteban Ocon finished in 18th. Pierre Gasly DNF'd after I think they said hydraulic issue with the car. And they're the 2 slowest cars in qualifying once again. It's absolutely abysmal showing for them.
Whatever that sizzle or that confidence that they had from Canada onwards, you're starting now to see it kind of being lost. So yeah, and just like to talk about earlier, it's like the amount of travel, the amount of racing all these teams have done, and just with Pierre Gasly, who's probably so excited to get out of Hungary. Belgium's going to be a tough track regardless for them if they don't have the speed to kind of compete. Yeah, they probably, too bad they can't just skip the weekend and just say, let's just go on a longer summer break than we have to.
Can you imagine just, I think I want to, just not this weekend. I just want to not. I don't think that would go over very well with anyone. And I'm sure Andretti would be sitting there absolutely fuming on the sidelines if a team took that approach. But
also, I think another team that probably is looking forward is Sauber. I mean, talk about a dismal first half of the season. No points to really show. I mean, but the team seemed in high spirits on the weekend. I don't know if you saw with all the excessive rain they received on the track. They started to pretend that they were canoeing in the water. I totally get there's no points to show for the season. I just it seems that they're trying as best they can to be in good spirits, despite a very dismal end to the Sauber era going into Audi for next year. We did also see some news this weekend. We'll probably talk about Haas, but Kevin Magnussen has announced that he's no longer going to be with the team after this year, and kind of makes sense. He had some glory years with Haas. They tried to bring him back. I guess it didn't really work out towards whatever their philosophy or their phase approach they wanted to go. I think they're probably now going to be looking at an experienced driver to kind of help Ollie Behrman next year, whether that's Esteban Ocon. I don't know if it's going to be a Carlos Sainz. You don't know. But I think he's looking at elsewhere, whether if it's IndyCar or maybe potentially NASCAR to kind of go for him.
Or Sauber has the potential to do one of the funniest things of all time and sign him to race alongside Nico Hülkenberg again, eh? But I doubt that'll happen. Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Haas has really seemed the last couple of races to have their act together in a way that for me was unexpected. What was the positioning here in Hungary? But we saw, not really a points finish this weekend, 13 for Hulkenberg and 20 for Kevin Magnussen. 15th for Kevin Magnussen. No drama the last little while. Some good points showings the last few weeks. And I think that's really all you can ask for from some of these lower mid-field teams right now, especially when we're seeing so many issues among so many of the other teams. So I'm kind of curious how that'll go with Ollie Behrman coming in. Like you said, if they bring in someone who's a little more experienced, it could be great mentorship for him. But if they've got this good working relationship here, and they're really, I don't know if it's something that they've worked hard to cultivate or if it's just come about naturally, I would be hesitant to bring in someone like Esteban Ocon, who's always kind of had it out for his teammates in the past. But it could be a great opportunity for someone like Valtteri Bottas if he doesn't stay at Sauber to come in, or, like a 1-year contract just to do something for Carlos Sainz. I doubt that they would have the budget, and I don't know that he's entertaining any offers from them, but I don't know. I think there's ample opportunity for some interesting things to happen there, because even though they are very restricted on their budget,
I guess like maybe the focus has not been so much being in the limelight per se, or being in the media every day talking, just kind of wheels down in the garage, looking at the car, figuring out the strategy. And, it's been paying dividends for Haas this year. And I think mostly like Nico Hulkenberg is having like a very good season nevertheless. And I know Kevin, we've kind of joked earlier that he's kind of been playing bumper cars instead of Formula One. Who could that one position be? Like, they obviously don't want to maybe go for 2 younger drivers again, because they tried that before with Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin back in the day. But and then they want to go back with 2 experienced drivers? So I guess whoever that balance is going to be for Ollie Behrman, especially such a young kid coming into his first ever F1 seat, I'll be really interested to see. And it's time will tell. Maybe we'll find out this week. As I edit this podcast, maybe something will come up. Knowing the luck
knowing us, it will.
Yeah.
Always seems to be we make a prediction and then either the news breaks before we release an episode, or it goes the complete opposite way to what we thought. I mean, who knows? I did say Oscar would get a win this season and it happened. I don't think this is the way I anticipated it going down. So who knows? Who the hell knows?
I think also to know, I know we have Spa coming up this weekend, is obviously a very tough track. It's very speed focused. It does look beautiful. I think a lot of the teams will kind of look for a kind of a bounce back. I'm curious to see how McLaren is going to address strategy issue in like a track like Belgium has. I'm curious to see how Ferrari is going to respond, getting some points in. Hopefully they can go out in a good way, especially for the summer break, because it is now, like I think I've said earlier in the episode, McLaren has overpassed Ferrari in the constructors, while Lando Norris is still in P2 in the drivers. The world's your oyster with Spa.
Yeah, I'm curious how it's all going to shake out. We're in a very different position than last year. Last year, Max Verstappen came first over his teammate with a 22-second gap. We're not going to see that this year. That's kind of a given. But I'm interested to see how it'll shake out. I mean, Lewis Hamilton finished P4 last year. I expect to see a similar finish, if not a podium finish, from him this go about, because he's been a very strong contender the last couple of races. But as I'm looking at the weather, I see some showers coming through this week. I see a little bit of rain and cloud on Friday. I don't know if it'll continue, but we might see some shakeups there, because as soon as Spa is a damp track, my take on who will do well changes so much with the grid that we've got this year. So I am excited to see a whole bunch of fun stuff go down. And hopefully, who knows, will we have an eighth winner standing atop the podium this year? I don't know.
I was just gonna say, like, the fact that Max Verstappen has won 7 races this year, and then 6 other drivers have won races. This is like absolutely wild just to think of like what we experienced last season with I think only one win, and that was Carlos Sainz in Singapore.
It's a whole new world out there. F1 is so back. It's so back.
Do a barrel roll.
Erica and I had media credentials for the Toronto Honda Indy. As you know, IndyCar is racing in North America, and they came to literally not that far from one of our apartments, and we could hear it loud and clear. I guess, Erica, I'll open up to you. What really stood out this weekend for you? Not only, I mean, us being media, the amount of just access we got was just absolutely amazing, because we would never experienced this probably like 3 years ago.
Yeah, so some of the access we got was for sure because of the media passes, but for folks who have never been to IndyCar weekends, they're so different than Formula One. And even just as a normal fan who's out there at the track, there are a bunch of things that you get to see and that are more accessible to you than they are in F1. So first and foremost, I can't say if this is at every race, but if you are in Toronto or the GTA, Fridays are free. It's an opportunity for everyone to come experience some of the practice session and some of the support races, because there are a lot of support races for IndyCar as well, like you would see in an F1 weekend. But we had a few friends who had purchased passes to watch the races from the grandstands and were able to get paddock and pit stop passes as well. So what's really cool about this, we were able to walk through the paddock, see all of the trucks where everyone was, working on the cars, bringing them through for the post-race evaluation. But for folks who had the pit lane passes, they were actually able to go kind of stand near the pit lane and watch the action like 2 feet away from them, which, one, not a thing in F1 at all, really. And 2, you'd have to pay an exorbitant amount of money for. So they're really creating a very fun, easygoing, and enjoyable atmosphere that I found to be so exciting. Even though we, of course, got a little bit more ins and outs in the background than some other people. I loved how the city really came together, and we saw people from all over and got to learn more about it, because it's, as a whole, very different racing than Formula One as well.
Well, it was like 80 something laps to begin with, and 85 laps particularly. Also, a couple of things to notice, like even on the Friday, all the drivers that are racing in IndyCar had an autograph session. And normally in Formula One, you would hear that be like 15, 20 minutes max with like 2 to 3 drivers. You actually have the whole grid for an hour. It's split it up into 2 sections. So a number of drivers were on one side, a number of other drivers were on the other. And you saw all ages. You saw families there. And, they had their Honda Indy cars. They were all in their merch and, a couple of Formula One clothings, but predominantly a lot of people had their Indy stuff, whether if it was a Scott Dixon shirt, whether if it was an Andretti t-shirt, or even if it was the really fun McLaren Aero hats. Or even the papaya hats. Like telling you, Erica, McLaren, I think, is a very popular team in Honda Indy, and it almost kind of caught the bug for me. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
I know you made a little comment at the end on Sunday there, and I was like clutching my pearls and gasping for air, because I was like, my goodness, are we going to have a little McLaren convert here? But it was very exciting to see it. They definitely have invested a lot into IndyCar in a way that I don't think, even as a McLaren fan, I realized. Like, I obviously knew Indy was big for McLaren, but not this much of an investment. We talked about it earlier. Zach Brown was actually in Toronto for IndyCar as opposed to being in Hungary with the rest of the team. We're laughing because we've seen that shit's hitting the fan with everything going on, and we're like, bro, you picked the wrong race to be at this weekend. It was really fun. I think we saw Colton Herta take his first win, I believe this was, which was very exciting. It has been a long time coming for him. Just chaos. It was actually absolute carnage too. Like, it's much more aggressive racing especially for a street circuit like Toronto, than what you would get in F1. And we saw some banana stuff go down. I'm really glad Pato Ward is fine because that was scary. Oh my goodness, it was just so much fun,
It
and
was
I would gladly go back.
it was definitely it was Colton Herta's first win of the season. But you also had Kyle Kirkwood as P2 and then Scott Dixon as P3, who is also the GOAT in Indy for a lot of people that don't know that. Yeah, and I think especially just seeing we got to catch up with some of our fans. We also got to have an interview, if you have not seen it on our social media channels, with Angela Collin. Many of you know she is a celebrity in the F1 paddock, but also she's helping out with Chip Gassy Racing with Marcus Armstrong. So got to have 60 seconds with her to see her take of what it's like to be in Toronto with the Honda Indy. So, I mean, we got to go to a couple of press conferences. That was really exciting and, you know, got to meet a lot of really exciting staff. And so we're obviously very appreciative of the media passes. And I mean, start kind of feel a little legit this podcast, you know, start to build that credibility.
Hmm. It's all exciting. But for context, when I say the racing was more aggressive and people are like, what? There were, so we had Colton Herta start as the race leader, and there were then 5 lead changes afterward, all starting at about lap 35. Um, we had how many cars DNF?
A
Because
lot
that
from
was
that one
crazy.
crash.
I think 12 of 27 cars finished the race, and we saw 6 of them out in one racing incident in which Pato O'Ward's car turned into a ramp that launched another car into the air. And I'm very glad to say that everyone is okay because I think that was that Ferrucci that went flying, like Santino Ferrucci went flying over and landed upside down, and that was a scary moment. But he came on the radio right after and let everyone know he was okay. Y'all, if you're in North America and you're trying to get a little bit more into the racing scene and you want something that's a bit more, I would say definitely affordable, but accessible, exciting, and up and coming sport. Because really, like we've had some people say that, you know, IndyCar is where you want to set your sights on now. It's not all just about F1. Highly recommend seeing what races are going on near you that you might be able to attend because it was honestly like a low key F1 weekend and I enjoyed it immensely.
Don't sleep on IndyCar. That is 100%. And we definitely we got to see some of our old F1 drivers that are used to be like, I mean, I was 2 feet away from Roman Grosjean. I saw, was it Marcus Ericsson, who was with McLaren back in the early days with when Fernando Alonso was there. And I'm just trying to think of any others. But like, yeah, I just got to meet a lot of great staff. And honestly, like, I kind of want to do a road trip. I don't know about you.
Indy 500, baby.
The
Indy
F1
500.
podcast / IndyCar podcast. We'll figure out a name, but it's a work in progress. But
The Findy.
trademark.
For trademark. Copyright, hashtag, intellectual property, all of those things. But yeah, it was a great time. I was so happy to see some other folks. I know a lot of other people were just casual spectators too, and it was a good time, people.
So that ends our episode of the F1 podcast this weekend. Thank you, everybody who met us this weekend in Toronto. And look, back to Formula One. There's a lot to discuss after Spa. What is McLaren going to do about these 2 drivers? Can Ferrari bounce back? What is Max Verstappen going to do in Belgium? Are we going to see any movement on Sergio Perez? Will he be kicked off the team? There is so much that will happen, and it is only frickin' Monday. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Linktree, where we have all of our links to our social media channels. I know Erica is working on a hot, awesome Honda IndyCar reel, so tune into that. And you know what? It's race week, baby.